But yeah, that the hope is, and I'll put this at the head of the recording, and we can I may have to type some. I'll have Chat GPT type something up so I can put it in the chat as people come in. But as trends or new technology hits the larger ecosystems, with some focus on the big cloud providers and any other big technology changes, that we fairly quickly get together and try and discuss what our patterned approaches should be and how we see that impacting, so we can share, predict horror stories. Hey, how are we going to adapt to this? What is everybody doing? What has anybody heard is the right way to implement these things? How do we need to change our ecosystems or our thinking to better leverage um, these kinds of technologies? Some of the fun discussions are around, what did I've said on the podcast I was mentioning, they were talking about, there's already been an evolution from Chat GPT and teaching, where people were writing their essays with Chat GPT, and so teachers were now checking Chat GPT, using Chat GPT to determine whether an essay had been written in Chat GPT. And there's another another layer of it where people are figuring out how to game the system for making sure that Chat GPT can't detect that it was Chat GPT. So each of these evolutions is already happening, and people are having to adapt and change the way they teach courses because of this new technology. So that's kind of a social impact. So here I'm hoping that we talk through some of the technological impacts, and maybe handle compliance and social if it's interesting. But get one of these together, and I don't intend to do most of the talking, but just to foster the communication. Hey, Jade. So hopefully it's an interesting topic, or interesting topic. So the first one, just to throw moderation in there, and we'll see, help me keep an eye over here for people hopping in, and I need to check LinkedIn, make sure people aren't pinging me for problems. A response from Mr. Lloyd. So self-hosted or cloud hosted? I know Salesforce's answer is, we've got the GPT, you just connect to it through a web service. Will we be looking at AI solutions where we need to host it internally, whether we need to tweak the model, train our own model, or have our own purpose generated or a different type of model on-prem, or we'll be using some kind of public hosting? And then what will those do to our ecosystems? What's the connectivity? Do we put it in a specific hosting, that is boutique for AI, or can we get away with some traditional things? Have we seen hosting providers ramp up tensor core laden rentals? I haven't seen any of those pop up yet, which is a little concerning. But anyone have any thoughts on any of that mishmash of possible topics?
Well, my initial take on public cloud, private hosted, is that from a high level perspective, the size of your models is limited by your horizontal computational power.
Mm-hmm.
So for models that may be industry specific, models that may be provide a competitive advantage from either in a subset of an industry or a particular segment or vertical or whatnot, we're going to see a lot of fractioning of models as they move down the stack into away from generative text content into very specific applications. It's already happening. And the determination, I think, is part of a security boundary, right? Can we let this AI out into the loose? Do we take the risk of putting it into a public cloud? Is it small enough and controllable enough that we could potentially keep it, bounded inside of our own virtual four walls, as it were? But my initial reaction to all of that is that the pure computational power to host and expand these models is going to preclude 95% of organizations from being able to host it themselves. They're going to have to go into the cloud because it's the only way that they can scale up and down as needed affordably. Whereas trying to do that on-prem, a small number of organizations can just purchase and have that capacity on hand. They're few and far between.
Yeah, I was thinking there might be a small space in time where you can buy out some former Bitcoin miners and pick up GPU cores for the cheap to switch over to AI workloads.
Well, well, they wouldn't be Bitcoin miners because those are the wrong kind of CPUs.
I mean, the tensor cores that are in most GPUs are what a lot of AI is making use of right now, if I understand it. And
Sure, but Bitcoin mining isn't done
on
GPUs anymore. It's done on specific hash machines that are designed just to do that.
Oh, yeah, the ASIC stuff that's more, but I was talking all the people that kind of got into Bitcoin mining and built up these GPU rig farms, in their basement and were mining hashes with. There was a wave of video gaming cards were hard to find because Bitcoin miners were buying up everything, and they ended up on the secondary market recently. Because the power consumption to Bitcoin value dropped below profitable. So there was a lot of heavily used video cards that were starting to make their way onto the market. And I don't know if those are still out there, if that was, people were very wary of buying secondhand things that have been run through the ringer of being Bitcoin mining hardware. But it was just a funny thought. I think everything is going to be much more specific. Tensor cores and so forth will be probably a lot more efficient as they go forward. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying, I think just following that thread, Eric and Paul, it's kind of interesting because like right now, I don't see a lot of companies being able to do anything on-prem. Everything has to be in the cloud, like Eric was saying. But I wonder, as things are changing, kind of similar to how even Bitcoin shifted their whole strategy around how to gather things. If as these AI models, as these generative AI models get smaller, they get more specific, like you were saying, Eric, as they come down more to the application level, if even the compute and the way they're computing right now, that whole power behind it is going to change to give more let's say availability to companies to do things more enclosed and not have to rely on the cloud. I think it's an interesting thought.
So, and my point on this, and tell me if I've got the wrong perspective. And Ian, I'm really looking for your input here too. So AI means, we all know that AI means like 80 different machine learning technologies, and even in the large language model space. Right now, what we're seeing with Salesforce is a text-to-text model. And if my company thinks that we need AI and we've made investments in AI and we've purchased this AI service and it's only text to text, but we need text to video or we need text to image because that's what we thought AI was doing. Now, how do we do that? Are we into it with 15 different AI providers because we want to do all of the AI and that's multiple highly tuned models, or is that when we have to start bringing and training our own because we have very specific computer vision models that we're trying to employ that isn't necessarily a service provided by a cloud provider?
So if I launch in here, I think at the moment, if people are looking for some form of competitive advantage, it's not, can I run my model locally? At the moment, people are still experimenting. So if we think about our time frame in terms of elements, because we're using it internally, but also we're using it through our application. It started off with us doing a bunch of R&D, so it didn't really matter because it was nice and safe, and the security team didn't care because it was actually off in a corner and therefore it's ring fenced and it wasn't operational. So you can get away with quite a lot there without actually having a great deal of cost associated with it. Salesforce is obviously making a big thing about the trust layer, which is really just an interface between it and the models. And so that. I think that's a bit of a red herring for where the conversation is going. The second thing we started doing is people got better at either writing prompts or refining prompts. So that then gave you a bit of a bump. We're now finding that fine-tuning the models rather than having a specific model is giving you yet another bump. So as the models are increasing in capability, the last thing you want to do is lock yourself into V3 when V4 and V5 are going to be so much better. So there's quite, it feels like there's quite a lot of benefits just from how to use the model rather than having to run your own model. And you don't need to train a model, you can fine tune it by actually starting to go, giving it because the context windows are far larger, I can give it examples of what I want the output to look like. That's what I mean by fine tuning it. So going, this is going to be the input. This is what a good output looks like. And I'll give you 10, 20, 100 examples of what good looks like. So suddenly it's now, and we're finding that's giving us as much of a benefit as starting to the cost and effort of building a model. And I'm sure big companies will get to the final point of actually having their own specific models. But at the moment, it feels like everyone is still playing with it, and the differentiator isn't the model. The differentiator is your ability to use it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And, my head is on, banks and government that, will be always the last to move into a public cloud of anything. Are they going to be using that? Are they going to need to leverage their own internals and try and figure out how to twin that tuning and maturity that you get by having a public cloud offering?
Well, but if you look at what they're actually doing, Paul, they are using public cloud just in what Microsoft calls the private stamp model, right? When you're a major government agency and you're using Azure, you're using all of the same tech that you and I or anybody else on the Azure stack can use, except it's ring fenced into your own, sometimes your own sort of mini data centers, as it were. And so the technology doesn't change. There are extra security controls and encryption and that sort of thing. But the core underlying tech is exactly the same. They just configure a stamp for a particular use case, but it's the same basic data center footprint. In some cases, they're running in exactly the same data center side by side with private or generally available public cloud. I mean, so the tech is the same, right? The odds that organizations of the size that you're talking about are going to rehome that are pretty, in my opinion, pretty minimal, because they don't have the reactivity to scale out the way that they need to, as like Ian's referring to, V4, V5, V6 of, XAI technology, whatever it is, continues to iterate, whereas the cloud providers do. I think you may see that you haven't seen yet, because the big four don't really have the capability yet. They weren't designed to deliver mass computational rent in AI, is that you will see AI-specific workload compute clusters become available. So you're a major airline and you need modeling for all your scheduling and stuff. Talk about areas where AI can make a massive improvement. That will be an offering that these cloud providers will be able to provide in a specific set of pay by the drink sort of artifacts out in the cloud. I just don't see anyone moving to, we're going to own our own silicon for especially for AI workloads going forward. I'm not, from the larger customers we're talking to, not hearing anybody talk about that either.
Okay. Do you guys feel like the trust capability is there to be able to trust it there? Is that security of you can only see what you're supposed to see healthy enough for us to go there? We saw this with the search wave. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Ian.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, which is it feels like it's going to be the security compliance teams are going to force on-prem. It's not going to be a technical decision.
Yeah, because I remember all of the fast search algorithms that were amazing and could deliver search results orders of magnitude faster, and they were bought, incorporated, and seen to be insecure. And then whenever they integrated all of this respect security boundaries algorithms into it, they were pretty much the same performance as the system that came before them. So I'm worried that the chat GPT or the other generative technologies might be on that same conveyor belt and just haven't quite hit that yet. So that'd be a question. Somebody probably has an answer to that already.
But we said the same thing about collab. We said the same thing about, oh, it's not secure up in the cloud. And we have these particular workloads, so they have to stay on-prem. And that conversation lasted about 3 years. And then the tidal wave of resources that the big SaaS providers can throw at it overwhelmed what any organization can do on their own from a security perspective. Are there niche areas where you have to have your own ring-fenced sort of, I'm going to invent a term here, cloud-gapped implementation?
I like it.
Right? Sure,
that is awesome.
There are, but is on-prem really on-prem when it's all running in a major data center anyway? Right? For most organizations nowadays, on-prem means a whole bunch of stuff in AWS or Azure. So and organizations are moving so far away from the physical footprint of data centers that I think it's a small number. Security, finance, medical, those are some of the fields where you may see some of these sort of fractal AI workloads move into some sort of containerization that's maybe physically gapped as well as cloud gapped. But I think what the more likely trend is that we will see movement towards IaaS and PaaS for, can we call this, what do you call AI as a service? AI as, that's a terrible
yeah, I'd like to buy a vowel.
but I think that's the more of the likely, if we're looking at waves of things coming, where that's what I see 18 months down the road.
Okay. Yeah, but do we think that the core technology is non-exploitable to the point that you can trust it out there yet?
Oh, we have no idea.
I assume Salesforce would say yes, but there's so many other providers out there that will be in the mix that it'll be interesting to try and understand that.
I think the answer is yes, but it's in very narrowly scoped areas. Was it the future's already here? It's just unevenly distributed. So
Okay.
there are certain narrow use cases where this is fantastic, and then others where you just don't want to go there yet. And I mean, the stories you hear of AI success are again in narrowly scoped areas. So I mean, pharma actually is actually quite a long way ahead in terms of AI, which is surprising when you consider that they're worried about compliance. But actually, it's in the R&D area where it's not getting near any drugs yet. So they're not hitting where they need to worry about compliance. So every industry, I think, will find places where they can use it, and the narrower the scope, the easier it is to start things running.
Gotcha.
So, Paul, I haven't been able to catch up on a lot of the stuff that came out of Salesforce at Dreamforce. I'm trying to get the bits and pieces where I can, but it sounds like several, if not most of you were there in person. What was the general reaction to the rank and file customers to all of the hullabaloo? And are they looking at it from a practical perspective, because it is a massive investment?
I think it was mostly touted from a feature, future capability more than what it's going to take to run it. Dreamforce is much more of a front-loaded show than it is an end-to-end thing, I would say. There were a lot of side discussions going on, and this I like to think is one of them. We're talking about the realistic impact, but there was a lot of, this is how easy it is to do this. This is how quickly you can do it. These are the types of things that somebody can quickly drag and drop together. Agentforce was really about a brand shift more than I think, staggering new technology. It's stuff that's been around and kind of been cresting recently, and they just kind of put it under a different label. Nadina, did you have any other take? You were probably in a lot more stuff than I was.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you said, right? Like Agentforce was the big thing. I think also what was not talked about, but seems that it should have had like more light was their reasoning engine, Atlas. I think that's a very interesting concept on what they're working on in terms of, let's say, the brains behind the co-pilots. Ian, I don't know if you want to add anything there as well.
Yeah, I do think Agentforce was branding. It was trying to scoop together all the AI capabilities, but they had extended it. I mean, the whole idea of thinking about autonomous engines and the reasoning was a major step forward from a co-pilot, which was, here, we'll put a prompt and it can go. And so the whole idea of, again, an agent that genuinely, you give it some resources, you give it some constraints, you let it loose and decide what to go, and it then decides what order to go and call different resources in, is a major step forward for where Salesforce has got to. But it was Dreamforce rather than Reality Force. So I mean, I think a lot of people look at this and go, great, but I'm not sure we can apply it yet. Having said that, I sat in a couple of go-to-market sessions for consulting firms, and Salesforce was pushing every one of you in the room needs to be building agents today for your customers. We've got a target of X thousand agents deployed by the end of the year. And that's why they've made all the AI training free. So there's a quite a lot of pressure being put on the partners to go, you need to get this implemented inside your clients.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure we will all have the same success that we've had with implementing and making a mint off of blockchain technology, similar to AI technology. Now, one of the other things, just as a shift to the topic, the things that I heard come up that may change the way we interact with this technology is around licensing and the consumption model. There's been a shift for consumption model with things like Data Cloud and Snowflake and other providers that are trying to kind of shift with that. There was some concern, I think, raised up to the Benioff level, that if you are doing the work for people, you're going to reduce staff, which is great for the companies, but it's not good for my license count for Salesforce stockholders. So you can't just sell me a magic wand. You need to charge me for every time I use it. And that may usher in a lot more consumption math that we haven't had to do traditionally in a lot of different environments. Whenever we're just paying for electricity, we pay for servers, and we were good. And we pay for cloud things, and we get, we're metered on IO, and that's it. And it's gotten more and more complex to do all of that consumption math, and trying to get somebody to give you, hey, I need this with Data Cloud and this functionality with AI. How much is that going to cost me? And people smile and leave the room because there's just no way to predict yet how much things will cost until you start engaging users with it. Whereas before, you could size it for the technical challenge, not necessarily for the user capacity. Do you guys see it going that way as well?
I would hope that Salesforce will study Microsoft's mistakes and not go too far down that route. The biggest complaints from every organization of any size, and it's now filtered down even to small and medium business, is that cloud costs are too unpredictable on a consumption model. Nobody knows what anything is going to cost. And the initial push to say, let's move everything to the cloud has now there's been a boomerang effect on that because of this cost, inability to predict cost. The per user per month model has its faults for sure, but it's predictable and CFOs like it. And if CFOs like it, CEOs like it, and investors like it, it is really hard to justify onboarding new functionality that you can't predict the cost of. And I'm hoping that Salesforce doesn't make the same mistakes Microsoft has made, because that has been a huge source of friction in that ecosystem that's starting to have very negative ramifications.
Okay. Yeah, I remember my least favorite evolution as a solution architect whenever I was told that I had different budgets for CapEx and OpEx items, and I had to go take a couple of accounting courses to try and figure out how I was going to solve a problem. Well, I need to throw more people at it, or I need to buy more licenses, but I can't build code. I can buy software, but I can't. And so the CapEx, OpEx, consumption, renting, leasing, per user, per interaction thing may make decisions for us, or start making decisions for us, that we have to go back on when those changes. I'm not looking forward to having to architect around licensing, but that is always an eventuality of everything.
If we just think about this from a different perspective, which is one of Salesforce, if they are betting the farm on consumption-based pricing, that suddenly puts a lot more emphasis on successful projects. And successful doesn't mean we get the marketing team to go in and do a nice 2-minute video. It means people are actually, it's working and people are consuming. So there's a big bet being made here by Salesforce in terms of that whole pricing model.
That is an interesting lever that I had not considered. Consumption requires success. That is fascinating. That could be a major shift.
Okay, let's take it. And then
good point, Ian. Yeah.
So the confused mind says, no, I just posted there, which is, if people are going, I can't work out what the pricing is, then that's just another reason to go, well, let's move on to another project where I can work out what's happening.
Yeah.
Take another perspective though. If you're a consulting firm, or your Salesforce professional services, and the customer goes, right, well, we're up for this. We'll do data cloud. We'll do something. We'll implement it. And the consultant gets to the end of the design phase and says, right, we've worked out it's going to be, you're going to consume, 250,000 credits a quarter, and they implement it, and then you consume 350,000 credits. Then who picks up the balance? The consulting firm? Or you need some pretty good change control over this. Or if the client buys 250,000 credits and they only use 150,000, they're going to come back to the SI going, why do you make us buy all these extra credits? So again, it's also making life more difficult for the implementation teams.
Yep. I've been on projects where we've walked a vendor that listened to a change that we made that cost us, that sent in a monthly charge for an extra $250,000 that the developer said yes to, but they didn't think about how the licensing architecture was going to work and call a service that had a per call charge, and they didn't bundle it up. They sent it atomically, and so one request went to 100 requests, and that turned into $250,000 of licensing, and that meant the end of that company's relationship as a vendor where I was at. And you put that kind of risk in front of vendors that I think that will steer a lot of people away from it if they don't have some kind of assurance. I think that sales will be smart and go, we'll figure it out later. If it's as long as it's 15% more than you're spending now, you're good. That's that will be their target. Do whatever you want. Build buses, build cars, planes, a fleet of jumbo jets. As long as we tick it up and get people using it, I think they'll onboard us for free early on, and then they'll figure out how to make the messaging work for true consumption-based licensing, or switch back to a predictable user model for their resources later.
Well, part of what I was
rather than be able
referencing
to re-architect things to be a successful project, it means that is when everybody actually gets paid, and I think that'll turn the entire industry on its head, Ian. And
hang on though, the sales reps at the moment are being paid on first year of credits they sell up front.
okay,
So that's going to change the behavior.
yeah,
So
that could, if they,
the Salesforce AEs, apparently at the moment, this is what I heard, it may change in February when but are being paid on the first year's worth of credits. So it's their incentive to front load customers with credits.
Mm-hmm.
but what happens that year 2 when they got it wrong by a factor of 10 either direction? Do they have to re-architect the solution? Does the customer get a credit? Does everybody walk away angry? Are lawyers involved?
I'm on another account by then.
Yeah, exactly. That's next year's problem. Yeah. That's future Paul's problem. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to make a lot of angry customers.
And this is why I was saying I hope Salesforce learns from Microsoft's mistakes, because we've already been down this road. We've been down this road for over 5 years now in that ecosystem. All of the contractual language now from consultants specifically excludes any type of cloud costs from their remit. That is on the customer. Whatever the customer decides, they're responsible for all cloud cost estimating, all cloud cost charges. The consultants make no representations or warranties or anything else. And what happens is, what we've already seen happen is the consultant, the customer, and the vendor, in this case, I'm referring to Microsoft, all work out this solution. And because the consultant has washed their hands and said, we don't handle licensing, we have nothing to do with it, we'll implement whatever you tell us to do. Even if we present a design, the costs for that design are incumbent on the customer. It's in the contract language. The customer gets mad at the vendor, Microsoft, because Microsoft can't provide a controlled estimate, or the costs are much larger, even if there was change in scope. The negativity flows back to the cloud provider. And the same thing will happen to Salesforce if they're not careful.
Yeah, no, I think that will be the next wave of backlash is people trying to absorb that. And that's funny that we've derailed like do we think this is the most significant impact of the AI architecture? I mean, it's just a web service that we have to consume. There may be some data transfer to train and retrain models, but otherwise it's just another corporate system, except for the fact that it moves further and further into the uncertainties of the consumption model when people are trying to sell it and predict it. And that'll bring that to a loggerhead. And they'll have to decide that. And that will be our barrier to entry into this world. Did you see that a lot with the PaaS stuff from like SQL PaaS and stuff in Azure?
Oh, yeah.
How do you rent a SQL server and charge per query or record row returned or anything like that?
Yes, in the abstract, maybe not that specific use case, but definitely in the abstract that consumption of these services, especially ephemeral services like cognitive services, which is all around your text-to-speech and the sort of pre-AI machine learning stuff all over in cognitive. And those costs are impossible to predict. And companies are stalling projects, not doing projects, pulling back on projects because of the cost unpredictability. I think we'll see the same thing happen here. Wherever there's cost uncertainty, right, that drives uncertainty in the whole project. And it's difficult to define, what those success outcomes are if you don't have cost predictability. In order to make this widespread successful, there has to be a way to get to, I can predict how much it's going to cost for my employees to be, interacting with agents every day, or classifying, 1 million documents a month, or whatever it is that AI is doing.
Does Amazon, does AWS have a secret sauce? It feels like they've got a rounded off version of the consumption model.
Same problems occur.
Same problems. Okay. Because I haven't heard, they've been consumption from the get, and I haven't heard, these major unpredictable. Yeah, you might get slash dotted or, botnetted, and that might trip something up. And I think there's sometimes forgiveness and there's also protection there, but it hasn't seemed to give anybody that unpredictability, anxiety that keeps people from doing projects there.
I hear the same complaints about AWS that I hear about Azure.
Okay.
Now, I should qualify that. Because AWS has a more specific set of offerings than say Microsoft, with all of the collaborative stuff that Microsoft offers that AWS doesn't do, traditionally been an iPaaS and IaaS vendor. Whereas Microsoft has a whole slew of SaaS stuff that they layer on top of that, that makes it even more confusing. And they're already well known for having a confusing licensing model. But when it comes to these types of workloads that don't have a predictable pattern, and we're not talking about seasonal spiking, which is what AWS was really built around for, to be able to expand, that sort of elastic cloud idea. We're talking about these multi-dimensional spikes happening in every direction across multiple services. You get the same cost unpredictability and the same dissatisfaction.
Okay. Yeah, I may have to go query some of the, because I'd like to understand, what their solutions have been, and hopefully with the Salesforce's kind of tightly coupling with Amazon these days, that they'll be able to learn some of their lessons and have the same kind of reputation. I know that I feel like Snowflake has a lot of trouble with that, but I don't feel like I hear the same thing from Amazon, but I may not be running in the right circles.
So Salesforce, the price they talked about was $2 per agent. Whether that's high or low, I've no idea. There's also the concern, by the way, what happens if an agent calls another agent, which calls another agent, and then they happily spend time chatting to each other and racking up a bill. But also a big push for Agentforce, although not mandatory, was Data Cloud. So agents work better if they have better data. Data Cloud is confusing. There are about 8 different SKUs for the different activities that you can do on Data Cloud. We've implemented Data Cloud internally, and it actually ended up being a lot cheaper than we expected because we architected it correctly. But again, huge fear from people going, but it's a lot more predictable, which is, we know how much data sits here, we know how much we're going to transfer, therefore we can do the volumetrics during analysis and then during the design phase, and we can come up with at least a good understanding about cost. That's not the same as a bunch of agents running away with you, or sit an agent on a customer-facing website, and then suddenly you end up with a foreign actor goes and writes some code to go and hit your bot every 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm hoping it stays that simple. Like I said, it was that weird news story that they were going to try and charge per interaction. That's definitely a couple of degrees from Kevin Bacon from being hearsay. So may not be there. I hope that they keep it to that very predictable, very easy to budget, and then just tune the pricing as they see people or figure out other telemetry to charge on if people are abusing it, or if they're building recursive agents. And
Well, but it's not just the implementation of the agent. Ian correctly brings up the risk factor of agents calling other agents. But what about flows calling agents? What about connectors and ISV solutions calling agents, right? From my perspective, I want every agent that's written in Salesforce to need to reach out to call something in Microsoft or Oracle or SAP, right? That's great for me. And I want to promote that as much as possible. What happens when the customer writes flows that call 27 different agents? And those flows run whenever a new record comes in, and that cascades to another record and another record. The consumption control would be almost impossible to contain.
Yeah.
But this is where we need to start architecting in the whole idea of, okay, you've now timed out, you've now used all your credits, now what? And there's an architecture around that which you see in lots of, I mean, tons of applications where, sorry, you've now used all the credits, you can't go any further. But I don't see any of that being talked about.
I think that's going to be the next generation of architecture, right? Because even as customers are implementing themselves, having all these agents doing all these call outs, it's just going to take one agent to wreck your whole consumption model. So safe gaps will have to be put in place.
Yeah, no, error handling frameworks, and now we'll have to have, credit depletion handling frameworks. What do I do whenever my agent gets downgraded from smart to dumb?
Or
Do I
you
go
can
back
only
to the
talk to
original? Do
5
I
other
fall back?
agents, right? So
Yeah. Well, yeah, do you fall back to the pre-AI agents and just go to a regular chatbot? Do you get an error? Do you what's the user experience going to be whenever everyone they didn't my flight got canceled and 200 people all of a sudden need help and they all hit the chatbot at once, and you exceed your pipe, and what happens to all of those people? And you have to start planning for that architecture. You have to plan for that event and program around that, and that has its own discrete cost that
Well, you need it to be predictable.
overage or forgiveness would solve too.
That needs to be a lot more predictive, which is if you're starting to see spikes building, you need to work out what you want to do about it rather than you run out of credits and then people are trying to work out what to do next. I mean, it's a level of sophistication which is certainly beyond me. People on the call probably you can deal with it, but I know it's absolutely beyond most of the admins who are out there where it says just implement an agent.
Shouldn't we have AI regulating AI? So,
well,
I mean, I think
shouldn't it be smart enough not to use up all your credits? And it tells you before it lets you create something that could be created.
I think that's where the reasoning will come in, right? How sophisticated these reasoning engines come in. So like using your example, Paul, where a bunch of flights get canceled, everyone gets on to talk to the agent. It should have some type of reasoning there to have a can response, start, rebooking people who have maybe a different type of status, having kind of those like war room conversations that you would typically have as humans where, hey, we have an accident, this is what we need to do. Those SOPs that are written off, people are dusting them off. What do you do in this kind of use case?
Yeah, this is a thorny problem. We live this every day as an API provider, right? Do we hard cut off people who exceed their limits? No, ideally not, because those could be critical processes that they're running. We have to have a human being look at it and say, what's the impact on this? Is this spike that we're seeing require us to provision more resources that cost us more? And how do we trickle those charges down to the end user? What happens if that impacts other customers? Like if suddenly I get a spike in all of my North American nodes, right? Fine, I can handle that geographically, but what if it's not? And I have to go spinning up resources in other geozones to handle traffic, and sometimes it moves from geozone to geozone. These are all difficult problems that you almost need an AI on the back end that you've trained to look at these things to handle those changes from the back end. It's a really thorny problem, and we're tiny compared to the size of the problem that a Salesforce or a Microsoft or an AWS would have addressing the same issue.
Yeah, I think this is where like specialized AI as a service, like you coined, Eric, would come in, right? Because these types of problems, they're not new problems. Like if you take something like a crouch, right, that happens, right? These kind of things will happen all the time. These kind of worst case scenarios. Have the AI think about these things well in advance, right? What is the worst case that can happen and how can we mitigate these problems? And then how do we work that type of architecture so that our, let's call it front-facing agent, doesn't have to consume all our credits trying to think about it. So this is like specialized AI, almost just like how we have specialized people who do risk mitigation every day. When a problem happens, you call your risk mitigation company, just like if you have a legal problem, you call a lawyer. I think we'll have that specialized AI as a service doing some of these heavy computes.
Or will it drive different? There's one of my favorite technologies to pop up in the middle of the new wave of cloud hosting. I think it was between EMC or like VMware and AWS and maybe Azure, that there was a company called PlateSpin that would track the price per compute that, kind of daily updated. Amazon would raise its, price per work unit more than Azure had, or, after. It's like the price of gas, and it would take your VMs and shift your workloads over to Azure to where you were getting charged less. So it was a middle technology that was, okay, I'm just going to back that up, freeze that. I'm going to redirect everything to the copy I just made real time over in a different cloud provider that's giving me a better bang for my buck on the pricing. And so kind of track that automatically, like traffic routing to the cheapest gas station. So it was an interesting tech that spun up before things got so complicated, and there was a simple price that you could track and react to that.
Well, and that works well.
Will
for
we have smarter services, or
like
will there be
IaaS.
ISVs in the middle? Yeah.
For shiftable services like IaaS, something like that makes sense. But if you're thinking in terms of agents in Salesforce, those are constrained inside of a single ecosystem, right? There's nowhere to shift that to. How do you react or take a proactive approach for cost constraint on that? These are all areas that mine's probably better than ours are working on right now, probably thinking about how to solve these issues, but they are issues nonetheless that the more adoption happens, the more these issues are going to come to the fore.
Right. Yeah. They either need to simplify this process to where we don't have to think about it, or they're going to cause a new gold rush of people building agents that track agents and agents that manage the agents that manages the licenses. And this will get so complicated that it doesn't become effective. There'll be too many points of failure and too much complexity, and it'll become cheaper to just put a human being on the other end of the phone, which I think is a lot of what AI companies are starting to see. They'll prototype stuff with humans and find out that coding it or turning it into AI is more expensive than just leaving a human on the phone to adapt to it. So I hope that we simplify the billing process so we can actually make use of the technology and don't cost ourselves out of the market.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the human component will go away, right? I think again, going back, I think it's going to come down to how much reasoning we want to do on the application agents versus very specific agents doing very specific jobs. So I think it's going to come down to like even the consumption model that it's $2 per interaction. What does that even mean? As an angry customer, if I hit that agent 4 times, that's 4 interactions. I think some of these things will have to get tuned, but it'll come down to the reasoning on how smart we want the agents to be from an application level. And then there'll probably be, I don't know, a next wave of whatever we call the next set of agents that will have even better reasoning, not as much compute, But I think a human will always have to be somewhere within the mix.
And Ian, I heard you say $2 per agent, and I thought, and Nadina, you said $2 per interaction, which is what I thought I heard. So agent sounded much more tangible, or at least manageable, as opposed to the spammable interaction.
Oh no, it was
Is there a miss there?
It was $2 per every time an agent does something. I think.
Okay.
I'll go and find where that was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought that I was hearing interaction. When you said agent, that sounded much simpler. I was hoping that was just news that I didn't
No.
have yet. But yeah.
I think it's interaction. If it's
Yeah.
$2 per
It is.
agent, like everybody be on the agents right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what defines an agent? Is that a logical pathway? Is that, a happy path through it? Is that one bot call, or, one chat GPT call? Or is it a set or something like that? I mean, there are ways to make that confusing.
The agent force pricing starts at $2 per conversation.
Conversation. Okay.
Conversation.
So you kick it off, it's back and forth, it's back and forth.
So is it like start and end of that interaction?
I've told you everything I can read here.
Okay.
That came from Salesforce's press release. It says here, Agent Force will be available from October 25th. Some components of the reasoning engine will be from February. Agent Force pricing starts at $2 per conversation. Standard volume discount supply.
Okay.
But back to the conversation that you've just been having. Number one, first of all, I think we've already had more discussion about the implication of this than many customers have so far. Okay. Secondly, if anybody started having this conversation and started thinking about, okay, I now need to put in mitigation, I need to work out a detailed process for how I pass it back to an agent, at what point, this just got quite complicated quite quickly. And it puts the emphasis back on, you really need to understand how your business runs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have that documented in and everyone agreed at a relatively detailed level, then this just isn't going to work. And you've kind of got away with it because you've got Sam or Jane or whoever, best endeavors, doing a pretty good job with some fairly incomplete processes and filling in the gaps. An agent's not going to do that. An agent's going to go, yeah, I'll do a discount. Yeah, why not? So
yeah, no, and
put the emphasis back on how well people have understood how well documented and understood their business processes are before they can really start digging into this.
I agree, and I like all technologies that seem like a silver bullet. They're seductive to people that don't understand their business and don't want to have to. And each of these technology waves, like with search, it's search engine's not broken, it's just the methodology you're using to manage your data is not conducive to working within a search engine. And we've had these iterations where silver bullet, not quite silver bullet, you need governance. You have to come back to these, and that's one of the conversations I was hoping would come here, is you need to have these types of governance and these types of understandings of your business model before you can even consider whether this will provide value. And nothing is a silver bullet. That always comes with the requirement of having some other disciplines, and which discipline do you have to lean into to be able to take advantage of this one.
I can tell you
That's
that
great.
It's remarkably difficult to get customers to even think about the hard work of preparing for AI. I mean, how many webcasts have we already done on that very topic? And countless presentations at conferences and whatnot, and the conversation is still ongoing about getting people to think about security models and location of their data. What they auditing that data and determining how they properly structure and classify that data to make it available to the AI. And people are They don't want to have that conversation because they know it's hard work and it's not sexy. They're
Mhm.
much happier to have the conversation of, oh, if I dump a lot of documents over here, it'll automatically classify all that for me, or here I can have it write my PowerPoint presentation. The hard work, the slog, the everything in the iceberg picture under the waterline, right? The stuff that we think about, customers don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And vendors certainly don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. The solution is the thing that gets sold, not the path to the solution, which is what we all end up on. But that's always the architect's burden, is to carve a path in between the dream future state and the real world. So love it. Yeah, I think we've hit on a lot of things. Yeah, there's benefits, and then there's the detractors, and then all of the governance that we'll have to put in, because the easier, the more something makes it easy for you to implement it, the more work goes into nesting it. Like if something thinks for itself, you have to put a whole lot more guardrails in it, and something that was fairly hard to build and you could only build atomically. And trying to come up with an axiom that's couching that silver bullet. Hey, the smarter the technology is, people aren't going to go away. You're just going to move where you need to use them.
Well, a big part of the problem here, and this may be a separate conversation in and of itself, is how little people have paid attention to governance getting us to this point. Despite what we've all said and preached and hollered about and whatnot for years, they just don't do it because it's costly and it's not sexy, and they can get along without it until you turn the AI on, and you start having conversations that expose all of that bad practice that you have been doing for the last 10 years, right? And then all of a sudden it's why is this broken? And we're standing there going, we've been telling you it's going to break for 10 years. You didn't listen to us. And so that the ease at which and speed at which it can retrieve information exposes how bad your practices were in storing that information in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, the more and more things, the better and better the tools are, the more they will expose your strength or weakness in understanding what your business actually is, how it works, and how it generates or absorbs or creates cost.
So one of the things
Common theme.
One of the things around Agentforce and Data Cloud is it's going to expose how poorly implemented most Salesforce instances are. Okay, because I can tell you the levels of technical debt in orgs is staggering. Our application basically syncs. One of the things is we're a process management and we're a metadata management application. So we sync about 1.4 billion metadata items and analyze them a month. So we've got some pretty good data. 50% of all custom objects never get used.
Yeah, and that still causes me to lose sleep, and I don't deliver Ian facts to anybody unless they've had a good strong drink to help wash that bitter pill down with.
41% of custom fields never get populated. So the numbers are quite scary, but the point is Salesforce's whole go-to-market model for the last 24 years is, don't worry, you can just use it, just get going. And I mean, you think about it, the architect practice and the business analysis practice have only been going, what, 2-3 years? So we've had 20 odd years of the Salesforce admin message of, if you're a brand new admin, you go and do your certification. The first thing you do is you open up the certification and it says first build an object. Okay, not architect, not design, not analysis, first build an object. We've got 150,000 companies where their introduction, if they've never come from a systems background, has been, well, certification in Trailhead says first build an object. And that's all going to come crashing down when people start looking at Data Cloud, if they try and apply the same principles, or Agentforce. Yeah, no, I had a conversation about that about 2 hours earlier today.
about the proliferation and the bringing up of people in the Salesforce ecosystem without the system background. But wouldn't you say it's been successful? I mean, hasn't this always been the philosophy, and aren't technologies always very appealing to rookies, and the world hasn't crashed down yet? Are we going to be able to continue to ride the wave and just we can do it so, not be very good at it, not have something built to last forever? It's no big deal that COBOL only had a 2-digit year. It's not supposed to be used for more than 50 years. We'll be on to the next thing. So don't worry about it so much, paranoid architect person. We'll be through this cycle and we'll be rebuilding it before those things come to bite us. Or have you seen? I've seen the critical failures. I've seen projects come to a halt because of too many objects and things being misused and abused and people not understanding how and why. But that's not the majority of my projects. It's been some, but most have been just fine with bad practice and bad governance because they don't hit that critical point.
But they didn't have a massively computationally enabled piece of spyware running in the background to expose all those problems in the organization in the past, right? Now we do. And if you think about it, that's essentially what these agents are, right? They're just corporate approved spyware that looks at everything and can process everything very quickly. Look, search, we could argue, had the same potential, except search never worked very well, and people didn't really know how to use it, and its capabilities to index content were at least time bound in what it could do. That's not true of the AI bots running inside of these massive SaaS platforms that have basically unlimited computational power. That's going to change, and already has started to change the bad practice exposure or bad architecture leakage or improper, permission matrix design. It's already started to expose those things, and it's only going to get worse.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I was trying to summarize: data cloud and AI will quickly amplify and expose problems with bad data and poor data governance. So maybe this new I love the perspective, Eric. The infinite computation gives you the ability to immediately shoot yourself in the foot with a cannon, as before when you were just doing it with a BB gun.
But it's not just data. It's not poor data. It's poor implementation practice. It's way broader than just poor data.
Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
And what's interesting is, if you don't, and our experience from Data Cloud is, if you don't take a rigorous approach to implementing Data Cloud, it does not work. It doesn't work very well. It just doesn't work. You can't get the data out, and then you have to unpick it and start again. It just doesn't work. And you basically throw it away and start again, because you can't go back and edit things and iterate your way to the right answer. But the point about AI is AI is going to expose this. So you sort of go, well, Salesforce has done pretty well. It's got to 30 billion. But it's only in the last few years it's really become a true enterprise player. It's done very well at selling 5 licenses, 100 licenses, 30 licenses, 300 licenses into clients. And that's really accelerated in the last few years. The same way as, well, it's okay if we run our corporate business around spreadsheets. Surely that's okay. Well, eventually that comes crashing down. And it's going to end up as data breaches. It's going to end up as, an agent running away and doing a bunch of stuff you weren't expecting if you don't have any governance in place. You don't have the implementation governance in place. It would be my concern. But the flip side is, hey, we've done okay so far. The business is running okay. You're all scaremongering.
Yeah, I mean, we have always, as architects, we always have the Cassandra complex. Seeing the problems and do they ever get here is the question. And are we avoiding reaping the benefits of something, but because we're avoiding a potential cost. I think security has proven that out, and breaches and lapse of reputation have made security compliance a much more foundational governance concern inside of corporations now. And hopefully do we have to have a breach type disaster with AI and in order to get this there, or can we pitch this governance implementation and being smart about it before we have that problem to implement these things the right way?
There's a trend where Salesforce is now more and more as being owned by IT. So originally it was bought by the head of sales who went, I can build this thing, we'll buy a bunch of licenses, let's get going. Oh, Pete, you know about tech, you know, you've got a laptop, you can be our admin. But as it gets bigger, it ends up in IT, who then go, oh, hang on. No, we're not doing that. We do need to think about architecture. So I think there is a general shift to moving it back in some organizations back to the people who do think about architecture. The risk is that the business will go, well, you've stopped us being agile. We're going to stand up our own. We're going to do it all over again and stand up our own instance of Salesforce somewhere else.
Yeah, that's I've pitched different orgs for that reason, and trying to keep nimbleness and capability, but limit the impact of loose governance versus the things that need to be strictly governed, and have a different cadence and much more regimented processes so that you can have both, and different ways to achieve that is very interesting, especially on single platforms. And the move has been to unify platforms, and I'm like, for sometimes, not always. But we'll see. I don't know if we can do that with AI components with those immediate cost impacts of Pete the admin accidentally calling a recursive agent call and costing a couple $1 million worth of consumption licensing. Do you feel like that they're going to lean, because there was a lot of anybody can do this? Do you think that that's going to continue? If they do anybody can do this, they're going to have to adopt a very forgiveness back-end system so that when Pete does that, they can go, oh yeah, no worries, that just cost us some money. We've built that. Accidents happen into our budget, into what we're already charging you. Here's how to avoid that next time. Or are they going to say, hey, this is source code managed, this needs to be IT, even though it's friendly, it's IT pro friendly and not power user friendly? Because I feel like I saw the messaging shift.
Yeah, I think that's going to come down to the training, right? Why all the AI training is free right now, where partners are getting enabled, making sure customers are more educated. I think that's the next wave, making sure customers are educated. And I think the days of accidental or falling in, like Ian was saying, a lot of Salesforce instances are owned by IT. So I think, at least from a messaging perspective, it feels like that shift is happening.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't agree, Nadina. I think the everyone can have a cert and you're all up and running. So the bottom level, the first level certification for AI, and every one of us can do it without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
The next one is I mean, the discussions we've had, it doesn't even get into that. I mean, it's the implications of it's I still don't, there isn't yet a AI architect cert, which I think is where you need to, where I think we're getting to.
Yeah, I think with a cert, sorry. I was going to say, I think with the certs that they have now, it's very similar to the early certs from before. But I think as stuff is evolving, I think more certs will come out, more training will come out. But as it stands right now, I agree. It's not enough.
And Salesforce's DNA is anyone can do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the message continues. Pete can do this, then they're going to have to make Pete friendly licensing. That's my question. Will they keep up with that so that they can keep that messaging, or will it sit? Flow is kind of there in the middle. It's easy, anybody can do it, but it's not really sanitized to where you can give somebody access to just build flows and not have access to all data and excessive permissions. It's still a administrator level permission to be able to build flows, write them, and access data. So the messaging is to me, a little mixed on those. And I feel like AI, a lot of the messaging for AI was, yep, anybody can do it, come on in. But you'll just need system administrator and a special AI developer license to do it.
I think they're faced with walking a very fine line if they get away from the core message. When I say they, I'm speaking about Salesforce as a whole. If they get away from the anybody can do it message, they leave the entirety of the SME market open to competitors. And we've already seen the HubSpots and similar come along and pick off a lot of that smaller business. I don't think they can afford to hemorrhage too much of that business by becoming a lockdown corporate IT only Microsoft-esque kind of implementation. Certainly that capability needs to be there, but if I put my marketing hat on and say, how would I market this? They're going to have to find some way to thread the needle between the two of those without giving up their ease of use over, everything now has to be approached as a massive Department of No implementation that takes, 24 months to even get off the ground.
I completely agree, but I think anybody can do this. The answer is anybody can't. This has now got to a point where the implications of doing this in business requires you to have a number of years worth of system building skills behind you and strong business analysis and understanding data. And you're not going to get that from some trailhead badges and some certs. You certainly, if you're a solo admin or in a very small team, you absolutely can't do this. There is no way that you'll be able to gain those skills sitting on your own and doing the training courses realistically. I talked to someone fairly senior at Salesforce who said the people who got us to where we are now are not the people who are going to get us to where we need to get to, and that's customers, partners, and employees. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to do AI. People could still get a ton of value out of Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Flow, and doing those sorts of things. The risk is that you tempt everyone into, just have another drink, you'll be fine. Just have one more drink.
Yeah, opening bars and parking lots.
It's really exciting, but I think Salesforce has got a lot on in terms of what they need to do to get this to work and success. And it's consumption based, so they're betting that they can do it.
Well, cool. I don't want to take up too much of anybody else's night. If you guys, unless you guys are really jazzed about the conversation, I don't want you to remember being stuck on this call forever as the big takeaway. So we can wrap this up, or we can keep going. I know it's late in the evening for some of us, so maybe we wrap this one up. I thank you guys so much for being here and participating. Again, as I said in the chat, please give me any advice or critiques or any ideas for putting this forward. I think this was a great conversation. I loved all of it. I'm going to go write down all of those axioms that we put up there.
But you've got a recording.
Yeah, the success. Consumption requires success. I love that.
You've got the recording.
AI as a service.
You can take the recording, get it into transcripts, and then ask AI. You know what the themes are. Chat does a pretty good job of taking that recording. If you're again happy to send it to me, I use Descript, and it will work out the five of us, the five different voices. It will turn it and then give it some key topics, and then AI will turn it into a reasonable transcript.
Cool. That'd be
And
great.
it only costs you $2 per conversation.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
You can I pay you in Woz coins?
Shiba Inu only.
Excellent. I need to drop as well because I've got a band rehearsal I need to walk into. So thank you, everyone. I've been fascinating chatting to you guys.
Thank you very much, guys. This was great. I hope to have another one soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.